We ended part 3 of class yesterday, and we are starting off part 4 by investigating Thomas Jefferson. And before we get into the life of Jefferson, let me just reveal my personal bias right out of the gates. So this photograph is of teachers and professors from all over the United States of America. There's me in the back in the red shirt. And we gathered in Scotland for almost a week to learn about one topic, Thomas Jefferson. So if there's one guy I've spent a lot of time learning about, it is Thomas Jefferson. I have very strong opinions based upon my time. So the majority of slides I'm going to be showing you in this video come from Professor Frank Cogliano of the University of Edinburgh, who created this PowerPoint. Excellent professor. It was a wonderful week and I learned a ton. So in learning about Jefferson, I'm going to start off with the non-controversial stuff. This is not going to ruffle any feathers. So Jefferson was born in Virginia in 1743. There he is. He went to school. He did very well. He went to the College of William and Mary from 1760 to 1762. He had a favorite professor, William Small, that really steered him in the right direction, who was a professor of natural philosophy and mathematics. In 1772, he got married. He married Martha Skelton, a wealthy widow. They had 6 children. Only 2 would make it to adulthood. Unfortunately, that was pretty commonplace at the time. Infant mortality was through the roof back then. So at this point, he was born. He went to school. He had a favorite teacher. He got married. He had kids. All very normal stuff at this juncture in the story. But Jefferson was very talented, and his talents brought him to the House of Burgesses, which was the Virginia State Assembly, and he did really well there. He was there for 6 years, and he did so well in 1774. He was elected to represent Virginia in the Continental Congress. He was unable to do so because of his illness at the time, but he drafted a paper for the Virginia delegation. This was published anonymously as the Summary View of the Rights of British America. So we see Jefferson cutting his teeth politically. We see Jefferson cutting his teeth as a writer. And this culminated into his masterpiece, in my opinion, the Declaration of Independence, this masterpiece of Enlightenment thought. We've already learned about the Declaration, and you know Thomas Jefferson wrote that. There's his draft, and there's the final copy. So even the greats have rough copies and peer review and all those things your English teachers want you to do. So at this point in the story, I think we know about Jefferson. Now, after he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he returned to Virginia and helped draft a legal code for the newly independent state. He wanted to get rid of primogeniture and entail in Virginia. This is a vestige of feudalism. Primogeniture, only the oldest boy gets all the inheritance. And entail is very similar, where land remains in only one male heir's hands. A bill for establishing religious freedom. You can worship however you want. This is before the First Amendment. Bill for the more general diffusion of knowledge. School. People should learn stuff. Bill for proportioning crimes and punishment. A precursor to the Eighth Amendment. So you can see this Jefferson's mind is already at work into what would become, very fundamental principles of America. So he became president in 1801, and right out of the gates, he had a problem. Right out of the gates, the Pasha of Tripoli chopped down the flag at the American consulate in Tripoli, which is in Libya now, and he formally declared war on the United States. So this is a brand new country. This is a brand new job for him, and all of a sudden he has a problem. These became known as the Barbary Wars, okay? And there's the ship, and you can see the American flag. And the Barbary states are here in purple. You can see it's North Africa. And what they were doing are pirates, and they were exacting extortion fees or stealing people's stuff. And America wasn't going to put up with that, okay? And President Jefferson sent out the Navy. And you can see the American Navy in its infancy fighting. And they had success. They had success. A big reason for their success was Captain Eaton here, who led an expedition across the desert from Egypt to attack Tripoli and eventually raise the American flag. And in this Barbary Wars, the American people were kidnapped. And we got them back. We got the American prisoners back for $60,000. So it showed the world that, hey, America's here. We can play with everybody else and don't mess with us. So Jefferson took us through that, okay, which I would argue was a positive thing. Here's another positive thing. You're not going to get a whole lot of pushback with this. The Spanish closed New Orleans. That's an important town in its location. So Jefferson said, okay, here's $2 million so we can have New Orleans. That was a good move. Okay, how he handled the Barbary Wars, I would argue he did a good job. How he handled New Orleans, good job. And then here's another biggie, the Louisiana Purchase. Absolutely expanded our country like you would not believe. And in 1803, him and his envoy agreed to purchase the Louisiana Territory for 16 million bucks. Napoleon needed quick money, right? So that's a great purchase. That's a great purchase. Okay, you see this big old line here, that big green thing? We got that for 16 million bucks. It's 2 or 3 cents an acre. Okay, there's New Orleans, okay? Through the Mississippi River, he kept that open. Okay, he showed the world not to mess with us. So at this point in the Jefferson story, most people are saying, wow, what a great mind and a great president. And he was a great mind. He was well read. He could speak all kinds of languages. He could play musical instruments. He was a brilliant mind. And here's another thing that he handled. The Embargo Act of 1807 was an attempt by President Jefferson and the U.S. Congress to prohibit American ships from trading in foreign ports. It was intended to punish Britain and France for interfering with American trade. So again, we're going out to the world saying, do not mess with us. Don't do it. And Jefferson is setting that tone. Okay? Now in 1809, he left the White House and he never left the state. And he lived there until 1826. And in retirement, he was rebuilding Monticello, kept working on it. He engaged in politics. He founded the University of Virginia, and he sought to protect his legacy. And here's a picture of Monticello again. Please visit it if you're ever near Virginia. It is worth the trip. And this is what the artist depicted it at as the time. Beautiful, beautiful place. Again, the University of Virginia, which is still around, that was created by Jefferson. So that's his legacy. And this is an interesting thing. His former rival became friends and later in life. So in retirement, Jefferson started getting in touch with Adams. They wrote each other hundreds of letters, and they actually died on the same day, 50 years to the day of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1826. So these two former rivals become very, very close friends all the way to the end, and they happen to die on the same day. Okay, and during his retirement, he spent a lot of time organizing his papers. He understood his position in history and his significance in history and got those in order. And his collection was really a catalyst of what became the Library of Congress, the biggest library on the planet. So, at this point, it's all pretty positive if you think about it. And on his death, unfortunately for him, he was $107,000 in debt, so they had to sell his property, including his slaves. So that's more of the traditional story of Jefferson. Now, here's the controversial stuff. Here's the stuff that's a little more dicey, and these two pictures should tell you what makes him a controversial figure. Okay, in 1802, his enemy, James Callender, published allegations about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Now, Sally Hemings was one of his slaves, and he has a pretty tawdry poem here essentially saying Thomas Jefferson is sleeping with his slaves, okay? I'm not going to say that. That's uncomfortable. Okay, now let's talk about Sally Hemings. 3 of her 4 grandparents were Europeans. Here's where it gets a little creepy. Sally Hemings was the half-sister of Jefferson's wife. So when he was with Sally Hemings, that was his sister-in-law. Sally Hemings' children were light-skinned, and 3 of them, they called it passing. They passed as white, and they lived in white society as adults, even though they were part black. According to contemporary accounts, some of Sally Hemings' children strongly resembled Thomas Jefferson. Now, here's the part that rubs people the wrong way. Thomas Jefferson freed all of Sally Hemings' children, which were his children. He gave freedom to no other slave family. Thomas Jefferson did not free Sally Hemings. She was permitted to leave Monticello by his daughter, Martha Jefferson Randolph, not after his death in 1826, and went to live with her sons in Charlottesville. So that rubs people the wrong way. And if you're thinking this is just conjecture, well, DNA evidence has pretty much proven it. And this is a photo of all Jefferson's descendants. And as you can see, it's a mixed bag. And Annette Gordon-Reed, a brilliant historian, she quoted in her book, Thomas Jefferson had 13 children, 6 of whom lived to adulthood. Some of his children were white and some of them were black. He had 4 sons born to him, 3 of whom lived to adulthood. He had 3 daughters who lived to adulthood, not 2. Jefferson did not live in celibacy for the 45 years after the death of his wife of 10 years, Martha Jefferson. He had a 38-year, apparently monogamous relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved black woman on his plantation, and fathered a child with her when he was 65 years old. Okay, that's a little more controversial than that first part. Okay, and here's the second part. Very religious people sometimes have an issue with Jefferson because he wrote to the Danbury Baptists outlining his interpretation of the First Amendment and advocating a wall of separation between church and state. He was the main founding father to say, do not mix religion with the secular government. And religious people don't like that very much, okay? And he even took his Enlightenment principles to religion, producing 2 documents, The Philosophy of Jesus and The Life and Morals of Jesus. He looked at Jesus' life without looking at his divinity. And as a Christian, that's a real important essential to faith in Christianity, that Jesus is divine. And it's interesting, it shows the Jefferson mind. He's Greek, Latin, French, and English. And he was fluent in all 4 of those languages, which is kind of impressive. And then Jefferson took a Bible and cut out the stuff that had to do with divinity and only kept the stuff that had to do with morals and ethics. Okay, again, if you're a devout Christian, cutting up a Bible is probably not your cup of tea, if you get that. Okay, so now that you know the basics, and I know this video ran a little long, what the assignment is in class if you were absent, I want you to create a textbook that is objective and adequately teaches others about Thomas Jefferson and his life and his significance. And when you are done with it, I'm going to ask you to please upload it onto Google Classroom. So that is it. Hopefully this video taught you a little bit about Jefferson, and I am curious to see how you do working as historians. So thank you for watching.